having this really, really relevant conversation today. Everyone is dealing with uh, thinking about what it takes to go back to the office itself. And Alan is a good friend, and um, what would we say? We used to work together, and we
Former
are
coworker.
former coworkers, and leverage each other as like co-mentors of each other, I guess. We meet on a regular basis, and always have tips and tricks for each other about like how to do things in business, how to think about sustainability, how to think about what's just going on at the time. And I will tell you, Alan is a huge resource when it comes to the sustainability space. So just so you guys know, I'm looking forward to this conversation. But before we get into it, we are streaming. We're streaming on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, on uh, Twitch, and on LinkedIn. And we are being recorded. So just so you know, that is those platforms are where you can actually follow up and get the recording of this if you are interested in getting a record of this. Um, so yeah, that's it. Um, so Alan, we can do this interview style. I can ask you questions, and then maybe if you want to ping me back, we can totally do it that way. Because that's always fun. Um, but
Sure.
yeah, does that sounds good? Okay. Before we get into that, then Roshan, I just want to welcome you to the room. Um, and Clubhouse is doing a thing, but hopefully it connects back up soon enough. Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me? Test,
I
test,
can hear
test.
you.
Okay. All right, good. It was glitching up there
Gets a
for a
little
second.
choppy.
Okay. Okay. So Alan, to kick us off here, you have had the opportunity to work with some organizations in the past, prior to the pandemic, to specifically help them um, figure out what to do some really um, I don't want to say inexpensive, but that's what the name of the title of the room is. Some really inexpensive solutions for getting spaces ready to move into. And they're also focused on sustainability as well. Can you tell us a little bit about like what the clients were looking for, and tell us a little bit about some of the solutions that. Well, first tell us what were the clients looking for in the first place. Let's start with that.
Sure. Yeah. So back about 5.5, 6 years ago, I joined Mace, which Brittany and I had worked for the same company at that time. Although I don't think you were there with Mace at that point yet. So I have an engineering and design background, and I've been working in pharmaceuticals for many years prior to joining Mace. And when I originally joined, they had this giant pharmaceutical program with one of their larger corporate clients, and they were looking to do this global expansion and redevelopment and reinvigorate of the organization. And they originally hired me in to do governance around the engineering and design because that was what my background was. And I got in there, and as so often is the case, it was too early, so they're like, well, we need to find something for you to do. So sustainability is kind of like that. So congratulations, you're in sustainability. And so starting from that point, it's like I had some background from the engineering and design aspect as far as, like energy controls and things like that. But I didn't have a lot of direct knowledge until I got into that point. So I kind of had to figure it out as I went. And so, in addition to figuring it as I was going, they gave me the additionally fun constraint that on the $1 billion program, what was originally $1 billion program, you get no people and you get no budget, as is again so often the case with sustainability work. So everything I had to do had to figure out a way to work within the project budgets on the individual projects to fund itself. Everything had to be self-funded. And over the course of the time with this, I figured out a way to do what I ended up terming financial sustainability, which is like projects, sub projects, initiatives that advances the sustainability goals and shows that you can have sustainable practices that are more cost effective than the regular practices in as much as they pay for themselves and potentially actually generate money in the process. And so that was really where this came from. So I was originally tasked with, develop a sustainability program for this giant R&D, program of works across multiple sites in multiple countries, and all of which were different, had different drivers, had different backgrounds, had different functionalities, and figuring out how to make that work for like large projects and small projects all across the board. And so we ended up coming up with like a platform of options that different projects could take. And so that was really how we ended up developing that. And then the projects, relative to the amount of capital funding they had, or expense funding in some cases, they were able to, pick and choose what made the most sense. So they could, easily get the low hanging fruit where that was available. And if they had the money, they could actually push some of the sustainability initiatives that did cost money.
So, when we talk about sustainability here, Alan, I mean, you mentioned a number of different aspects of sustainability. You specifically mentioned financial, but I mean, it seemed like the goals of the organization were thinking about it from, from a carbon reduction perspective
Sure.
and,
Yeah.
uh, you know, reduce energy utilization, things like that. Um,
Right, and that was kind of my first object with doing this because they had just completed this giant lead platinum, like double platinum project 2 years prior. So they're like, well, we just did that, so we don't need to like focus so much on this. So we have like corporate, mandates that we have to do this, but we don't want to spend money on it. And so that was really where the challenge was, as far as So my first objective was defining sustainability relative to what the needs were, and so I developed that like guiding principles that were built around enhance, reduce, and give back. And so enhance was like, finding ways to do things more efficiently, more effective, more reliable, so you can use things longer, better versatility. You can use things in different ways, building up robustness so it doesn't wear out as fast. Reduction, that's the typical, decreased consumption. But it was also a matter of like really finding in creative ways to repurpose. So it wasn't just a matter of recycle. It's like, okay, well, we have these things. Even if we can recycle them, it's not necessarily the best way to do that. Can we find better ways to do that that are not just better for the environment, but better for the community as well?
yeah.
And that really got into the give back aspect, which was the community involvement to leave things in a better state than we find them. And usually a lot of projects are like, oh, well, if you take a tree, plant a tree. And so yeah, we did that where we needed to do that. But a lot of what we were also doing, we were getting out of a number of very large sites. And so one of my initial thoughts was, okay, so we're leaving these sites. What happens with all of that perfectly good furniture? And the answer initially is, well, it'll get, either landfilled if it, or recycled as much as it can be. And I was like, well, that's no good. Like in many cases, they just bought the stuff. There's nothing wrong with it. It just wasn't up to this new standard they were trying to do. And so in doing that, I started bringing up like other initiatives where we started doing like a resale option. So we were able to find a resale broker for a lot of the office furniture. And that way, rather than just like putting it out to scrap it and recycle the scraps, we were able to find new homes for all of it. And in doing so, it was obviously more sustainable because it was going to further use. It was being reused. It just wasn't being used by them, and it reduced the cost to get rid of it because we were able to get some of the, like a portion of the profit back to the company that paid the projects for doing it.
Nice. Okay, so I'm loving where you're going with the story that you're telling about what took place on this project. I mean, just to kind of backtrack a little bit, I mean, you were supporting a company. Was it just across the nation, or was it internationally as well?
Yeah, it was international.
Okay, so you had a broad scope of the facilities themselves, and they had different goals for different locations based upon, what the desires were for sustainability, um, for each location.
Actually, yeah, that was one of those points of interest. So I'm like, the UK in general and Europe in general has a much more robust opinion of sustainability is not so much financially driven as it is in most companies in the U.S. And it's like in the U.S., it's like, oh, you're a bunch of tree huggers. If you can't make this financially palatable for me, go away.
Right.
And that was what I was getting from a lot of the stakeholders in the U.S. and a lot of the project managers as well. And so the UK, we were able to do stuff, and we found better ways to do it because it was just their normal way of doing business. Whereas in the US, I had to like find new ways and creative ways to get it done, or it wasn't going to happen.
Right. Well, and what you were describing was there was basically no funding for doing this
Oh yeah,
this
yeah.
work.
There was zero funding. If I couldn't get the project to pay for it off of their budget, or find creative ways to get the money back for having done it, it didn't happen.
Wow. Right, and you know what? So what I like about this particular example, that you're telling us is that it's so similar to what a lot of companies are trying to do today. Even though this was what, 5 4 5 years ago or so, um,
Yeah,
it's very much in line with what a lot of companies are thinking about today, in regards to looking at their entire portfolio, and they're trying to think about how do we actually not just not spend any money, but do space reduction and reduce our operational costs. Um,
exactly, and that was so much of what they were looking at, because I mean, like, a lot of the reason for the project was they were trying to spend the money on a couple of sites and make them hub sites and basically get rid of everything else.
yep,
So they were, that way they were spending less money on the real estate, all the utilities associated with, and everything involved. And sustainability wise, that's actually a really great thing because the less property, the less you have to maintain, the less energy you're using, less waste you're generating, all across the board, you're using less. So that, it's dramatic reductions on the reduce end of it. But at the same time, you have to be careful that you don't over counterbalance that with building up the site where you have it remaining, because you're still doing work there.
yep. So what I do want to do is just really quick, welcome Sodiq, Sana, Amarali. Sana is one of our co-moderators that joins us in our Lean Construction Roundtable. Amarali is an added voice regularly on our conversation. So if you guys do have anything to contribute, please raise your hand. We are talking about something very similar to what many organizations are considering these days, which is evaluating our real estate, and figuring out creative solutions, inexpensive solutions to really just implement in a way, where there's an update. Um, there's an update to space in our workplaces. So as we're thinking with the lens of return to office, there's some parallel with the example that Alan is sharing today. So yeah, love to hear from you, Roshan. Welcome to the stage. If you could just quickly introduce yourself, and share your thoughts.
Sure. Thank you, Brittany, for having me on. Just a very brief introduction. I work with scientists across multiple domains, and we are about finding sustainable solutions in different segments like energy, manufacturing, agriculture, and more recently into the construction and construction technology domain. Because based on our analysis, I think just the concrete industry alone accounts for anywhere from 7 to 12% of carbon emissions. So, yeah, so what we've done is we've actually gone ahead and designed a new composite material that actually replaces about 80% of concrete with a new composite material, which is 10 times lighter, and it can be assembled 10 times faster. So for any, I guess, technology to be considered maybe disruptive, you need to have a 10x factor. So yeah, I guess that's the brief intro with regards to the construction and construction tech space that we're in.
I have a question.
That's great.
Yeah.
And Roshan, since you have the background with the scientists and all that, something I can share with you that we found was enormously valuable from a sustainability perspective. Reevaluating the types of chemical fume hoods and the types of biological safety cabinets that you have. and being able to share them when you can to be able to eliminate as many things as you can if you're able to share between scientists, because each one of them sends so much energy straight out the exhaust. Because I mean, like typically when you have those types of labs, it's single pass air, meaning that's like as much air comes in is just goes straight back out. And so all the energy that you spend conditioning the outdoor air, it's just like blown right back out the exhaust. And just to give you a perspective on that, from what we were doing in one half of one building with this project, we eliminated 89 fume hoods and upgraded 65, and eliminated 25 DSCs and upgraded 45. And between the two of them, it was just shy of $1 million in savings per year in energy. And like on the chemical fume hood side, that it was 8 million kilowatt hours per year.
Right. So I think what we're trying to also integrate with this technology, and we haven't really made a use case for it just as yet, but we've kind of correlated different kind of use cases with the same technology, which we're hoping to bring down heating and cooling costs uh, by a factor of 10 as well, because what we're
That's
doing.
fantastic because HVAC is the single largest contributor to energy use.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so instead of having a single maybe duct or outlet, um, you know, we thought why not use the entire wall structure to be more like an insulator, and by itself it has a lot of insulation properties where you have a temperature differential of between 5 to 7 degrees based on the ambient temperature outside. So I think that would compound the natural um, insulation property of this material. And also, if we integrate it with a central system, which we're hoping to bring down the energy cost by a factor of 10. So I think if you stack everything up, it would make a great case for an overhaul of the existing technologies. And I think the space we are at right now is getting the material tested and certified according to building codes and
Mhm.
you know material specifications and whatnot.
Yeah, and certainly for offices and general use manufacturing areas, that would be fantastic. Something to keep in mind when you're working with the scientists in the labs and such. There's only so much HVAC that you can reduce because for the labs they have minimum amounts of air they have to change over for safety purposes, let alone cleanliness.
So I know
Yeah,
Marcus, really quick, you had a question. Was that for Roshan?
Yeah, I had a question for Roshan. How does this compare to cross-laminated timber, or how does it compare to hempcrete? Is
that's
those
great.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question, Marcus. So the first comparison that I can bring would be the stress or weight bearing capacity of the panel, which I think a regular timber based structure wouldn't be able to hold that much load. And we have a weight to material ratio of 1:100. So if you have 1 square foot of this composite material, we can hold about 100 kgs of weight. So it has a fantastic weight to strength ratio. And with regards to hempcrete, um, I think we are also looking to integrate that into the technology because we haven't had the opportunity to really experiment with hemp. But the closest we've come to that is using agro waste, right? You have your rice husks, which we've processed into fiber boards, which comes very close to a hempcrete mixture.
So I'm to follow up with that. I'm assuming you're also looking at like Are you looking at just the material, or are you looking at the whole building process as well? Because I'm thinking about passive homes right now.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, we are looking at kind of an integrated approach where we're also addressing the fact that once you have to demolish the structure, what do you do with the debris? So with this technology, you can actually move your home as is, or actually break it down into panels and then move those panels and reuse them again. So it would make a great case for demolition and debris, containing situations as well.
So generally speaking, it comes in panels, and I assume something along the lines of like a concrete block for CMU construction. Um, is it pourable as well? And like, if it is, do you need to have like a rebar situation?
Well, if you're going vertical, I think with maybe like a skyscraper situation, you might want to look at having a steel frame and then using these panels as interior and exterior cladding materials. But if you but the panel alone, like I said, it is a weight bearing structure, so it can actually hold weight. So if you're doing like a ground plus two, I think we've managed to do that with the same material.
So it's a matter of how much weight, what's the actual stress that you're going to be putting on this. It has weight bearing up until a certain point. That's what you're describing?
Yes, because based on the thickness of the panel, we can actually go up to 2 floors. We can even do four, but we prefer to kind of lean on caution, on the side of caution, and go with steel beams to kind of reinforce the whole structure. But yeah, we can definitely do 4 floors without a steel reinforcement. It's just that the panels will have to be way thicker. So, we have to find a good balance between panel thickness and performance.
Very cool. So, Roshan, thank you so much for contributing to this discussion in regards to what you have come up with in regards to a sustainable building solution that's an alternative to concrete. So really appreciate that contribution. We want to just welcome Adam to the room. Welcome, Adam. Also, another co-moderator on our Thursday morning conversations. But just kind of reset the room here. What we're talking about today is we're going back to the office. Many people are going back to the office, but people are trying to figure out how can they do things to prep and how can they do it inexpensively. And Alan has quite a bit of experience of delivering sustainable solutions that do not impact bottom line at all, literally zero cost. So, well, I should say net zero from a cost perspective. So, Alan, you were talking with us about how you were delivering internationally for an organization. Um, just some really practical solutions for this company that
Mhm.
can actually be applied to what we're doing today. I think I like Roshan's specific example because if we're thinking about new builds, if we're thinking about how do you like Marcus's question, how do you get a hub location where you're considering um how do you make sure that the spaces are um, the ones that you want to invest in are the most well invested into and or where people want to actually arrive to, and then how do you let go of the spaces that are no longer serving the organization. So love for you to kind of jump back in to talk about some of those solutions. You started down the path of furniture, but you can certainly take it wherever you'd like.
Oh,
Marcus, it looks
sure.
like you
Yeah.
came off mute. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I just
Hey,
wanted to
Marcus.
say I'm very happy that Alan is here, and Roshan, thank you for adding to contributing to the conversation. This is totally my jam, and I'm looking to hear more from you, Roshan, if you have anything else to say. And Alan, please keep going.
Sure. Yeah. So I am with Tony's point as far as like deciding what the hub locations were. I wasn't super involved in those conversations because a lot of that happened before I was ever involved in the projects. But basically, it was really a matter of where the location was relative to the transportation hubs, where it's like the best physical location to actually have the offices, as well as looking at things like the local and state taxes for the tax burdens. Do you need to be in the city? Can you be outside of the city? Is it better to be outside of the city given what you're doing if it's manufacturing plant, things of that nature? Um, and just like the logistics of getting things in and out, are you near an international airport? A lot of those go into deciding what those hub sites are, and it's really an interesting question because it's not so much sustainability wise, but I expect with a lot of the changes happening after COVID, that's going to need to be a really good question that people really start asking themselves because it's like, do I need to be in downtown Manhattan anymore? If I do I need to have this super expensive real estate? If I have a lot of people calling in because they don't actually need to be in the office, why am I spending this super ridiculous amount of money on this real estate when I can be out in Ohio for all it matters? And it's a conversation I imagine a lot of companies are having, and if they're not, they're going to have to at some point. Because if a lot of your best people aren't going to want to come into the office all the time, and they start moving out of the area too because they don't need to live around those areas, it goes to the question of why do I want to stay here? And so that really is a good question as far as like, okay, so what will determine the hub site locations in the future? And I have to believe it's the most practical locations around the centers for actually, like distribution and just logistical reasons for having them there.
Yeah, absolutely, Alan. And you know what? If you look at the news, those are the kinds of conversations that, have been happening over the past year, year and a half. But I think it's kind of coming to a head and it's like, what are the drivers now for a location and how are we going to maximize space so that it is attractive for people to come to?
Yep.
Yeah. So, Adam, you've come up to the stage. Welcome. If you want to introduce yourself, and then if you have something to contribute, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks, Brittany. I appreciate the poke, the urge. I love seeing Jubei and Ryan as well. My mind when Alan's talking is goes to the other four S's, right? The sort, set in order, sweep, uh, standardize, and then sustain, right? And so that's the 5S process from the Japanese really perfected it. And I hear Alan sort of say, "Hey, sort out. Do you really need this office space or not? And then if you do need it, well, let's set it in order. Or let's maybe be very strategic about what office spaces are in what areas or who serves what. Like where are people, and let's set it in order. And then when I set it in order, and then we like sweep it and we make it like so that we can see everything, quality, safety, etc. And then we try and standardize it, right? Like where it's the same or brand it, where it's the same across. And then with sustainability from there, that's like the ultimate goal of systems, right? To be self-organized, autonomous, self-improving systems. And so, I love Alan's kind of thought, and I'm just kind of expanding. I don't know if maybe I'm kind of taking your thunder, Alan, and I apologize, but that's when we start talking about sustainability, and then when I heard you talking about, well, do we really need it or not? That's like when I'm on a job site and it's like, hey, I see, the tools scattered everything. Okay, well, what tools are we using? What are we not? Like, let's get rid of the stuff we're not. Are
Exactly.
all our materials ready? So, anyway, that's my mind. I'll yield the floor back to the team, and would love to hear your input, Alan, on the other four S's and those impacts.
Adam, I'm right there with you because I completely agree with everything you were saying. Because yeah, I am like a lot of the companies are doing what I'll just say it was GSK when we were working on this program. They were going through that conversation. This is back 2013, 14 when they were putting this entire program together, and they were realizing, do we need to have all these sites, or do we have a couple hub sites and we bring everybody that we need to have at those hub sites and release everything else? Because that lets us be able to spend more effectively and you can do more with less that way, which is a big deal for sustainability. If you don't need to be having all these sites all over the place, there's so much complexity in doing that. And it's like you have to spend the basic baseline of all these different costs everywhere. So rather than spending those baseline costs everywhere, spend the baseline cost in only a couple places, and then you can expand upon that to make the sites that much nicer and that much more sustainable, rather than trying to build upon that everywhere when you try to standardize. Because standardize is great, but when you have a lot to standardize, it's a lot of work to do it too. And something else that going back to one of the sustainability initiatives, I think is an interesting topic with this overall conversation was the carpet selections that we had. I had a big fight with a lot of the leads at a number of the sites, and I wanted to have sustainable carpet, and then it was going to cost a fortune, and we already have all this stock that we don't. Why would I get rid of all the stock? And when all their carpet was horribly unsustainable. It was, I mean, like looking at the specs on it, it was just terrible, because it was like back from the 80s and 90s at all these sites, and they had the inventory stock, but it was junk too, and it was so old it was basically worthless. It was it was already fully depreciated, so it was what it was. So I was trying to figure out how to get more and better in there while we were doing this. So in this particular instance, I reached out to a company called Interface, and they frankly sold me on one of their products, and I'm so glad they did, because it was a great product. So it was one of the most sustainable, as far as carbon reduction options for all the different carpets that were out there. So it had a very, very low embodied carbon value, especially compared to what they already had there. And it was cost comparable when you looked at the actual install cost. So the cost per square foot, it was marginally more expensive, but it was more expensive. But the specific type that we were looking at, it had like a technology, so it avoided having to have any adhesive, and that was one of the ways they dramatically reduced their embodied carbon. And because adhesive is basically all carbon. So by being able to do that, you just basically put these down square by square by square, and when they're down, unless you peel them, they don't come up. They don't shift around at all. And we proved that it's really good, and we verified. It's like going along the other directions. It's not just more sustainable. It had better color fastness. It had better wear profile. It looked just as good. And everybody really liked the different designs they had, and we were able to get that, so it was very nice. After we finally sold them and got this stuff put in, we ended up standardizing that, and that became the global standard for all these sites when we moved forward with it. And it was absolutely cost comparable, if not less, because rather than having to spend all the time and effort for all the different installers to put down all the adhesive and then getting down each section of carpet, or doing a roll-on carpet and having to cut it back, it's so time consuming for the installer, rather than just literally dropping these tiles, bop 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 bop, and if something needed to be adjusted, you pull it up and put it back down. So it was super fast and easy, and it removes an opportunity cost for the client that way too, because you can turn it around so much faster.
I love that example, Alan. It's so simple, um, but at the same time, it took a little bit of time to do the research, right? And have someone really explain to you from an organization like Interface. They have a wealth of information that is out there if you just look. I mean, they have a cradle to cradle program where
Yep.
if you're recycling the carpet itself, right, like it goes right back into production. They have a lot of sustainable minds. They have a mindset around sustainability that exists, and there are companies out there that are very similar, not necessarily in the carpet space, but very similar in mindset in regards to that. So yeah,
Exactly, and just a quick add on to
sure.
this. I mean, I don't mean to plug Interface, but I'm going to, because I really like what they did with this. So one of the programs they had, they were actually taking recycled fishing nets from Southeast Asia. They actually started in local programs where all the different communities that were very impoverished were able to go around and collect all this junk off their beaches. So they're cleaning their beaches, removing all the litter, and getting paid to do it, because they were able to take it in, collect it, and send it to distribution centers where it got turned into carpet and other materials. So it was remarkably sustainable in more than one way. It wasn't just a matter of it was embodied carbon. It was just being able to recover things that were otherwise unrecoverable, and litter and waste in the oceans as well. So there's like so many good points for the stuff that we were doing with that. And to your point, yeah, there are many other very good, very sustainable carpets out there. And I know there's other carpets that have similar technology where it's like the laydowns without the adhesive. But I will say the interfaces version of that worked very, very well. And like their overall sustainability profile was just outstanding, which is the reason we now finally settled on them.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I do want to welcome Michael, who is a big fan of Alan, into the room. Who also just so happens to be my dad. So welcome, Dad. Sana, welcome back. Ramton, we're happy to have you. Welcome to the room. We are talking about workplace, going back to the office. And, we're evaluating, a lot of organizations are evaluating what is happening, what are we going to do, and why. What is the value that we're going to be thinking about as far as what our facilities are going to be doing for us moving forward. So sustainability is wrapped up in all of that. We touched on a number of layers of sustainability, whether it relates to financial sustainability, reducing carbon, trying to reduce energy utilization. There's a number of different aspects to take into account when it comes to sustainability and also longevity, right? Like just in general, what is that resilience factor? What makes sense long term for an organization and how is that taken into account? Adam touched on that a little bit earlier. So how do you sort and how do you plan for that? So those who are in the audience, I mean, Alan has been sharing a little bit of his example that where he worked with GSK, a client, past client when he and I were working together, and some of the solutions that he was able to provide the organization in order to, in some ways, get to net zero cost, which that's where a lot of organizations are right now because they don't want to invest too much knowing that there might be a change down the road. Who knows what this impact of the pandemic is going to be? So we'd love for anybody who's in the audience to chime in. But Alan, in the meantime, if you wanted to jump into another aspect of this project, we'd love to hear it.
Sure. And so while everybody's thinking of their questions to ask, another really big ticket item that was like a super happy point for everybody involved with this project. We had all this lab equipment and this lab stuff, where it's not just the equipment. You're looking at like the glassware and scales and things that just like it's not really quote unquote lab equipment, but it's like everything else that's in the lab. And as we were getting out of some of these labs from some of these sites that they were getting out of, we're like, okay, so like just like we did with the furniture, well, what do we do with it? Because it's perfectly good. We hate to get rid of it. And similarly, along with that, there's it's like all the artwork on the walls and all the office stuff. Everybody has this, all their stuff on their desks that they don't necessarily want to bring it with them, especially when you go, which previously we were moving to like an open plan away from the offices, which who knows what that's going to look like now. But when we did this, that was the case, and so we were looking for a good way to find new life for all of that because there's nothing wrong with it. It was no use to them anymore. And so when we started looking at, okay, well, so just because it's no use to them, there's still value to others. And when we start looking at that, there's not necessarily a dollar value involved with it, but there's definitely dollar value involved with it when you have to try to either landfill it or try to recycle it, which is one of the reasons that landfilling and recycling should really be the last options if you can help it. And so we actually developed this donation program, which was remarkably successful. So for the sites down at RCP, they actually got this off the ground themselves internally before I ever got onto the projects, and I was able to take what they were doing and build on it, which was just really remarkable. And so we were able to go through all this office stuff as well as all the lab stuff. We weren't actually able to donate any of like the HPLCs and lab equipment. They had to sell that for internal safety reasons. But we were able to donate this, and it was so many pieces. We actually donated over 100,000 pieces of lab and office quote unquote stuff. And all over North Carolina, we hit almost every county in North Carolina, as well as a couple in, I think, Indiana and Kentucky while we were at it, and all around the Philadelphia area. And so by being able to do that, the it was helping for like internal redeployment for what they were looking at. But the real value is we were able to find new life to stuff that was just not going to be used otherwise. And so we were able to donate this stuff through a donation broker that I found around Philadelphia area, and they were a nonprofit, so it cost nothing to use them. They took care of everything, and as long as they didn't have to be sending it out because they couldn't do that, they didn't have the funding. If people came to them, they could get their hands on as much of this stuff as they wanted at no cost, which was just fantastic because it helped us help all the local schools, the local universities, community education organizations, and things like that. And so, like just around the Philadelphia area, we helped most of the community colleges. We helped probably a dozen universities, many of the local high schools. And just one little lesson learned we had out of this: working with high schools where you have to deal with like the whole government situation, the deal that you have to deal with the high schools that you don't have with the universities. It's really hard to get the high schools to do anything because there's so much red tape. And so it's one of those things where everybody's like, well, we want to do this. It's the right thing to do. But we ended up having to avoid doing that and not do it in entirely too many instances because the school boards made it too dang hard to get to the high schools. And that was, it was too bad, but we were still able to do a lot of good with this. And just a couple examples. So we were working with a company that was in partnership with CVS. And so there's this Kensington Health Sciences Academy that's in one of the not so nice neighborhoods outside of Philadelphia. And our partnerships, we gave them a lot of glassware. And through the glassware and the partnership with CVS, they were able to establish a program that trained the locals in the area to become pharmacy techs. And they would pay to continue them on to a degree. And so, like the glassware from GSK and CVS's know how to do this, and the money from CVS, it was really putting money back into reinvestment in these neighborhoods to really help people. And like some of the work we do with Immaculata College, they got donations of glassware, and they started new organic chemistry classes that weren't previously possible because the glassware is just so thick and expensive. And there was like a donation of sterile disposables to a biomanufacturing certificate program at Montgomery County Community College. And that became one of only 30 in the nation, thanks to these donations.
I love all of those examples, Alan. And there was a company that I supported also when I was consulting with Mace. I guess it's now about 3-4 years ago, where we managed a move from one space where they wanted to move out of into a brand new space that we were renovating on behalf of them. And there was a similar concern about what do we do with the furniture that is no longer going to be in use. I like your comment that you made around the donations of furniture. I love what you guys were able to do. What was interesting about this company is that they did not want to donate to organizations that um, were outside of their ecosystem. Although they wanted to make that donation, but they were concerned about the liability. If there was anything
Oh yeah.
wrong with the furniture itself, yeah, they didn't want to have a ding per se against them if something malfunctioned. So fortunately, they had a foundation, and they were able to coordinate because they had already done um, donations to these schools already. We were able to coordinate with those schools to basically have them pay for the move costs in order to actually get some of this furniture that
Yep.
was, I mean, really, I mean, top quality furniture. Like, we were able to replace like one school's entire cafeteria furniture by using, this one company's furniture, and then like another one, like we had these really um amazing, beautiful steel tables that were super, super durable, great for a middle school or high school, that was able to like replace tables and in multiple classrooms where, some were just like getting run down at the locations where they were. And I'll tell you, like it was a really, really interesting process to go through just to think through all of the concerns that a company would have when they're thinking about donating and setting up a program for reuse and recycle in another organization, if it's a school, if it's a training program, whatever it is, but also to figure out how to manage those hurdles, depending upon what you can make in an agreement with them. So really, really cool example.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Brittany, we actually had to deal with exactly those same things. And like I was making comment that like the actual lab equipment we couldn't donate; it had to be sold. It was exactly for those reasons because and like they were worried about the liability. Well, say some terrorist organization around the world got their hands on it and started making bioweapons. And like sounds like a superfluous issue when you're just saying it out loud. But for a pharmaceutical company, it's a very real concern because if that equipment got traced back to them, it's huge, word of mouth. It's like, oh, you contributed to this happening, and they certainly never wanted that to happen. But for like the innocuous stuff, and just also, I'll say it's pathetically scary just how much the schools lack because even when you just give them like reams of printer paper, they are so thankful because usually outside of like the first one or two reams every year, the teachers are buying it themselves, and it's just horrible.
Right.
But it's like it's like the most innocuous stuff. It's like just the most basic stuff. They're so thankful to be able to get their hands on it because it stops them from having to spend their own money on it. And but also to your point about the liability, where I brought the donation broker in to be able to handle a lot of this, they were also a liability break, and that was one of the big points of value in having that.
Okay, so a donation broker, consider their value from a liability break standpoint. That's really great. As I think through, the organization that I'm employed with right now, much like many other organizations, we have a real estate and location plan where we're considering, okay, well, what what leases are we planning to exit within the next, umpteen years, and what are we going to do with this furniture? We are also transitioning from like one to one seating. And obviously, nobody is going to be working in the office full time anymore. I shouldn't say nobody, but um, it's going to be considerably fewer people working full time in the office moving forward for most organizations across the globe because it is generally understood that remote work, flex work, hybrid work, whatever you want to call it, that combination of things it works. People can be super productive and it's fine and it's but there should be a reason to come back to the office. But to your point, Alan, there's got to be a transition plan, and there's going to be a ton of excess furniture out there. There's going to be a ton of excess just material products coming out of these facilities depending upon what they do. And there should be a bit of a donation plan, which is going to be an incredible task for a lot of organizations.
Exactly, because I mean, like, as just a kind of a global statement, because there's nothing really putting this together in totality. And like, think how many companies are downsizing their office footprints right now. How much office furniture is that going to free up across the board? What are they doing with it? And I mean, I don't know that anybody other than maybe like the CBREs of the world really have a good point in visibility on this because they don't own all of it. Um, but just like okay, so hopefully we're not just going to end up scrapping all of this and at best recycling it because there's so much potential good value use for all of this stuff. And I really hope that somebody's out there looking at that and trying to find a new use because there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not needed anymore by them.
Right, right. There was an organization. There's a workplace mosh pit that takes place what like every other week or so. David Gray, he's instrumental in leading that. And there was a conversation the other day that I was able to participate in about about what are we thinking about personally right? How do we take these concepts um, into into our homes, right? Like how do we take advantage? Like are you and I, is anybody in the audience thinking about how they can leverage what's being donated, what's available, this reuse mentality? Because there's a ton of opportunity for this right now, and how do we then not only do that in our day-to-day lives, but take that into the natural way of doing things, as far as the way that we think about workplace moving forward, much less from a sustainability perspective, whether it be financial, energy, carbon reduction, all of those things, right? Like, how do we just make the spaces better and um, more suited for the person, for people, for human life, right? Like, how do we improve the viability for wellness in these spaces, right? Um, so I think there's lots of opportunity to kind of turn that switch on, or maintain it as we go through these changes in arenas that we may not be used to going through every single day. So uh,
But you
yeah,
know, also at the same time, as people are downsizing, they still have the same rough, assuming all else equal at the company, they still have the same, operational budgets coming through. So, potential operational budgets anyway. So, if they don't have to spend these operational budgets on 3 million square feet of space around the world, if they, now they're looking at, say, 750,000 square feet, because they don't need to have all the offices. They can focus on, building offices around where they have to manufacture, where they're doing R&D, because the spaces where they have to be there. So, it's like, do you need to have office spaces and locations outside of those? Because if they can just call in, you can really focus down on those sites where you need to be. And then that means you can focus your operational budgets and your M&O, so that you can build up those sites to be that much more interesting, because you have the greater budgets to spend on the fewer sites, and the smaller amount of footprint, so you can make those sites better than you could otherwise.
yep, totally agree. I mean, the hospitality expertise has made an influx into workplace, because, to your point, people want to make spaces more interesting or more valuable, right? For people to actually um occupy when they do need to come in to work. I do want to just do a time check. Alan, how much time do you have to stick around?
I can stick around as long as you guys are around.
Okay, cool. So I wanted to acknowledge those who are in the audience. We have Michael, Sana, Jubei, Hend. We'd love for you to participate in the conversation. Melody, welcome to the room. We'd love to have you as part of the conversation. We're really just talking about workplace changes, and what does uh, sustainability or just simple workplace changes, there's so many changes that are taking place as we're thinking about returning back to the office, and we'd love to reduce the amount of cost to the bottom line that we're ultimately investing. So yeah, love to have you participate in the discussion. Roshan, he chimed in a little bit earlier and shared about a really great sustainable solution, alternative to concrete. But love, I mean, we could certainly go that direction as well. But love to hear from you guys. If you have something that you'd like to add to the discussion, please just raise your hand. Also, for those who are listening online, um, we'd love to also hear from you. If you have a question for Alan or anybody who's on stage, we'll take your question if you put it in the chat. Hi,
Hi,
Melody. Welcome to the
Brittany.
stage.
Hi, Alan. Hi, Marcus. Hi, all. Hi, Roshan. Um, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Perfect. So, when you say inexpensive sustainability tips, are we referring to like commuting? Like, what does that refer to?
So what we were referring to was ways that you can implement sustainability options projects, initiatives, where they um, either pay for themselves or cost less than standard practice. And so, like, over the last hour, we were giving some examples. So, like, through this program of works I was working on, we changed out the different types of carpet they were having and went with a much more sustainable carpet. So it's something like 3 times more sustainable, judging by the embodied carbon content, and it was cost comparable in terms of the actual cost. But because it didn't have any adhesives and it was deemed equivalent or better in every other way, when you look at the install cost and the time to install, it was that much better than standard practice. So we ended up swapping these out and making that the standard to all the different sites. And
You
then
know,
I'm sorry.
no, go ahead, Alan. I was just going to comment.
Okay, well, we were also talking about things like donation programs and reselling programs, where you have the different things that are being freed up as people are getting out of different areas, things you don't need from the specific project. If you're buying new stuff, if you change like the the standards that you have for your furniture, it's like it's still perfectly theoretically, it's still perfectly good furniture that you're getting rid of. It still has value to somebody else, even if it doesn't have value to that company. So finding ways to be able to resell that and recoup some money, or find some ways to donate it so you can get a new home with somebody that's going to value it, where you're able to. And if you can get yourself a donation broker like we did, you can actually get it out for free. It dramatically reduces your waste costs, while getting it a new life for all the furniture.
And does that answer your question, Melody?
Yeah. Um, I'm currently still going through my program for architecture interior design, and a lot of what has been weaved throughout the program and the curriculum is like the whole notion of sustainability. And last quarter, I took a class for surface materials, and a lot of it was heavy on the like sustainability options, and because now people are not only just looking for the aesthetics, it's also like, okay, is this good for the environment? What is the output of this? And they also still want something that's like stylish and you know, um, easy on the eyes. And it was so hard for me, like trying to come up with creative ways to like incorporate that into like my design. And because I know that's going to have to be a big selling point when I get out there and start like putting my learning and my degree into practice. Is like, okay, you can design, you can do this, you can do that, but can you do like construct in like a sustainable manner? Because I don't even know if I would want to do commercial versus residential. And I feel like for commercial, there's definitely going to be a sustainability factor, right? Like if they want to be LEED certified, et cetera, et cetera. But then like residential people too is like where I get like nervous, because it was just so hard for me whenever I'm doing a project and there's a sustainability element. It's like, oh my gosh, I get completely thrown off. I get completely like sidetracked and just, where do I start? Where do I look? Because maybe I have it in my head that sustainable options aren't, as aesthetically pleasing as, some of the less sustainable options, but I don't know how to like get around that. Like how to, where do you guys like source your sustainable options?
Well, I using what your example with the surface options, something that you can look at if you're, especially for high rises and things where there's a lot of windows. There's dimmable windows, and if you can, you can have the light coming in when you want it. They're still perfectly transparent, but you can also like flip a switch, and it's it makes it more dim. It's kind of like eyeglasses where you can change the tint on them, and they're really cool. They are more expensive than standard, but you can also do a cost evaluation on that, and it has dramatic insulating value. So it reduces the HVAC requirements for heating and cooling by not letting as much heat come in and out, because it doesn't let as much air, or doesn't let as much light in.
So
Um,
Alan,
so
could I take it a scale back up?
sure.
Um, Melody, to kind of answer your question, what I would, I mean, you're looking for sources. But as far as materials go, and there are ton out there, and they're
Yeah.
constantly changing, and they're people are very competitive out there. So like, if you're committed to sustainability and designing with that in mind, you're gonna have to well, there are a couple things that you should likely bear in mind. Now, I'll start with I think the most important thing, um, to consider the building as a whole, to consider operational cost, the whole cost benefit analysis in mind when you're considering design solutions. So you're not thinking about it from a material perspective only, but you're considering material costs and labor costs, or you're considering distance that the materials have to be supplied, um, to your location versus it coming, like tile coming from Italy. There's a cost, there's a carbon footprint, there's considerations like um, that can be made that impact a sustainability cause, if you will. There's also something that I think would be valuable for you to consider as you're going through architecture design school: passive homes. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but it's considering your environment in such a way where you can utilize um, the zenith positioning of your space in order to maximize the amount of daylight that's coming in. Alan just laid out the windows, right? You can obviously invest into the um, tinting capability, but if you just simply position a location of your home in a particular place and put your windows in a particular side of the building, you can maximize heat if it's a cold environment, or reduce the amount of heat in the space. So that's, I mean, really basic stuff, which I'm sure you're already learning. But if you consider passive homes on a whole, there's a plethora of other things considered when it comes to design from an energy modeling perspective, and even design integration for your different building systems. So your plumbing and your heating can be combined. So I know I said a lot there, Melody. Did you have any questions on that?
Oh no, I'm just like doing my little notes and taking it all in. So I just try to like blink every time like I hear something, just so I'm still listening. But that was really great, Brittany. I think that you gave me a definite new vantage point to look at things from, because I do get stuck sometimes, because I can only think from my point of view, and it's really hard to like kind of be like, okay, what would be another way to do this, or what would be another option, or what would be another viewpoint. So I
Mm.
do appreciate these rooms. It does help me like broaden my thinking and like my resources, because I do struggle sometimes, and I'll take a little bit break, maybe walk around, see what my classmates are doing, etc., and or talk to people on Clubhouse, and it is very, very helpful. So I thank you guys for your input.
Yeah, you're welcome. And you know what? There's another architecture firm. They're actually based in London. They design now is They are considered the second most sustainable building in the world. But they designed the Edge. If you're not familiar with that building, it is based in Amsterdam, and it has passive design uh, in mind when it was designed, but it also is technologically tied in. It's integrated really, really, more so than most other buildings. Now Bloomberg has surpassed them and is based in London. They were crushing on the Edge before they built their building. Um, Marcus, did you have something to add there?
Yeah, the name of the architecture firm is called PLP Architecture. If you, from a design perspective, I would just Google them and see what some of the designs and some of the things that they had. Literally, the reason why they started their architecture firm was to focus on sustainability. They put it to the forefront of what they're trying to do. But from a design perspective, their designs are really good. So if you get a chance to listen to any of the architects who are principals, who do any like speaking or anything like that, or just reach out to them directly, um, I think that could be a really good resource And outside of those, that
Mention the podcast.
company, there's some other firms like um, some standards like the Well Building Standard, Reset, Fitwell, which are around uh, the human performance within the building and focusing on the wellness of the human. There's another standard that's in Europe. I can't think of the name of it right now, but that could be another place to go. But PLP Architecture was the name of the company.
Thank you. I wrote that down.
Something to add with this also, as you're looking at these different types of buildings and like different things you can do, because I mean, like you can also be looking at the roof and like the style of roof, and you can be getting, covering it with solar panels, whether they're actually the embedded where it's the roof itself or on the roof, and that has different heat retention values and that and all that stuff. But it really goes to you really do need to do the evaluation and the assessment of the building, especially from an energy use and an HVAC use, because that's the single biggest energy contributor and carbon contributor because of that. And that's where you have to really understand that location matters as well. Because what is a good design in, say, Arizona or California is not going to be a good design in, Tornado Belt is not going to be a good design in the Northeast with all the snow, or even the Southeast with all the humidity. Because when you're trying to do air conditioning, the amount of humidity you have in the air is a dramatic impact between wet bulb and dry bulb, and it'll take a lot more energy to do the same amount of cooling. And
Sorry, go ahead, Alan.
also, just like structurally, when you're looking at that too, when you're looking at the actual house design, which has to come before you look at the sustainability aspects. If you ever notice that, like when you look at the houses in like the Northeast and especially on mountains and such, they tend to have very steep roofs, and they have a lot of metal roofs, and it's unique to those locations where other places don't do that. And I mean, like you certainly wouldn't want a metal roof in the Southwest; that'd be insane. But they do that because it makes sense with the snow, because it diverts the snow, so it avoids accumulating the snow on the roof and collapsing the building. Whereas in the Southeast or the Southwest, you would never need to worry about that, and it would just be you'd be putting yourself in an oven if you tried to do it. So it's like the actual reasons that they have for doing different things in different regions. You need to understand that before you can really start doing the sustainability options around that.
Alan, you've made such good points. And Marcus, thank you for chiming in and actually calling out PLP architecture. If you want to go ahead and take a look at our podcast, Melody Constructor, that's constructr.com. You can search for two architects, Ron Backer, Bakker, and Kevin Flanagan. We've interviewed both gentlemen about the different sustainable designs, both about the edge, and then we focused on CLT, carbon laminated timber, and either, I guess, those episodes respectively. So I would imagine that those could be super helpful for you from a mindset perspective. But you're going to get the biggest impact when you consider the engineering elements from a sustainability standpoint. Cost reduction, energy reduction, and I trust me. I think from a material standpoint, you're going to probably pay more. To Alan's point earlier, I don't think you were in the room. Like there's sometimes a premium cost to materials when they um, are quote unquote sustainable, but the installation method may change, which could reduce the cost. So lots of things to consider. And I think because Alan and I are super passionate about this discussion, we probably can go on and on and on. But we hope that we've answered your question to some degree, Melody, and I hope that you can take that forward and get some value from it.
Definitely. I definitely got a lot of value. I got a lot, to start like looking through. I saw the constructor. It's in the same name spelling in your bio. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. So I will definitely check that out. I've been trying to find like architecture podcasts, but I feel like it's hard to find in like podcast form. It usually will be videos because I try to, listen to something while I'm in the car. gain knowledge that way when I'm just driving. But yeah, it's typically maybe because interior design is kind of like a show and tell thing rather than just talking about it. But I found like a couple, and now I'm glad to add that on too. So thank you so much for everything. I am gonna head out, but I gained so much knowledge. Thank you again.
Excellent, and you're
Hey,
very
Melody,
welcome.
real quick before you head out, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and also, and coming up with these topics that exactly to your point, the schools just don't talk about a lot of this stuff because a lot of the professors, they understand the design aspects of this, but they've never really taken the operational side of it, and they don't, there's just not that much experience there. I actually started my own company called A Pay Education, which is a virtual education website dedicated to the topics that schools don't teach. So I have a couple really good sustainability topics up there that I think you'd probably find really interesting.
Yeah. Thanks so much for mentioning that, Alan.
Thank you. Sorry, my mic was still on. I was talking. But yes, thank you so much, Alan. I will definitely check that out. But I will see you guys. Are you guys running on like scheduled meeting times? Because I don't feel like I've seen these rooms before
You
for
know,
prop.
You know what? PropTech, we actually run conversations, we run rooms just about, I would say, 4 days a week. So we have to build out the scheduling for the next couple of weeks, but follow the club, please, and look out for events coming up. We typically focus on technology on Tuesdays. On Wednesdays, actually, it's Marcus and I who typically host when we actually talk about smart cities, which is based on the Smart City Community Club. So if you're interested in that, you can join there on Wednesday. And then on Thursday morning, we talk more about execution, actually construction implementation with the room is always called the Lean Construction Roundtable. So we talk about lean from many different perspectives, from the owner's perspective, from the design perspective, from the construction perspective, from an operational perspective. So how do you? It's a back. It doesn't use the word sustainability, but ultimately it has that in mind when we're talking about how to just operate. And it's a really really fun conversation. We actually start that on Thursday morning, super early. We start at 6 a.m. on Thursdays and roll all the way until about 9 a.m. Central. So yeah, if you're interested, we're definitely happy to have you join us, Melody.
Perfect. I just followed the club, so I will definitely be joining in from now on and
Excellent.
popping in and learning and contributing. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your question and contributing today.
All right. Bye.
Bye
Bye.
bye. All right. So, my wand, welcome to the room. I know you popped in a little bit earlier, and we always appreciate you here. So, thank you for joining the room. Um, I know he just wrapped up his civil engineering degree. So maybe Maiwan, you and Roshan should connect because he has a interesting concrete alternative that's super sustainable. So maybe that's a connection there that you should make. But Alan, did you have anything that you touched on? Sorry, didn't touch on that you wanted to make sure that you covered based upon the example that we were talking about the GSK rollout of sustainable solutions that ultimately needed to be a net zero cost.
Um, I think I got through pretty much all of it. It's like talking donation program, the value of doing reselling of furniture, looking at the other like the carpet options, looking at really understanding what um, your equipment is. So like the example, which obviously it's very specific to this with those biosafety cabinets and fume hoods, because it dramatically impacted the HVAC of those buildings, and we saved a huge amount of energy and money by doing that. It's like there always needs to be an analysis going into this to understand where your big ticket items are. So you're making sure that you're focusing on the right things when you're looking at a financial sustainability aspect of it. Um, because I mean, there's only so much you can do, especially when you don't have the manpower, because you don't have that either. So it's like when you have the limitations put upon you to be able to what you're able to do, find do the analysis, find the big ticket items, figure out how you're able to impact them in an effective way, and push it through with what you're able to do, and find advocates. With what we were doing, I was going out and talking with the scientists and the different stakeholders to find internal advocates, because they helped me push it through. So if I was having a hard time with the bean counters of the world, you find the people that are passionate about that in the company, and you can get an internal advocate that way too, and it helps. And just as a final note, I apologize. I don't remember the exact amount of footprint reduction that we had. I think it was something like 10 million square feet between all those sites, and we reduced it to something like 3.5 to 4 million square feet. It was a dramatic reduction, and by doing that, we actually generated more than 75,000 tons of carbon dioxide reduction. So, I mean, huge, huge numbers by being able to do this. So, as we're looking at this, especially now after COVID, where people don't need to have as much office space, there's huge sustainable value in addition to the financial value in being able to reduce these things. It's less waste, it's dramatically less carbon, because you're not having to operate all those other sites if you can get out of the sites, or you can, if you're leasing less space, you're not paying for the M&O of those uh, spaces either. And in terms of the energy reduction that we were looking at, it was 50.6 million kilowatt hours. So huge, huge numbers, and it was about $4 million a year in energy.
What incredible data points, Alan. And I just have to say, honestly, like, this has been an amazing conversation, Alan, and honestly, it's always an amazing conversation with you. But I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to share it with the audience here, who's not only listening on Clubhouse, but on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitch, on Twitter, and on LinkedIn. So we hope that this conversation has been super valuable to those who've been listening in throughout. I do want to just open it up for some final last thoughts here. Roshan, if you have any recommendations for our next discussion, or if you want to share anything that you liked about the conversation. Also, Michael, Hand, Maiwan, if you have comments, please raise your hand. We'd love to hear some feedback from you guys. Roshan, if you wanted to share your feedback.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think I pretty much resonate with the approach to maybe a systems kind of approach where you're offsetting costs with other factors like insulation and maybe other technological inputs that would really have a bearing on cost reduction. So I think that's a great approach, a systems approach and an integrated approach versus just isolating maybe a materials factor or maybe labor factor or whatnot. So, yeah, absolutely. And the whole fact about bringing circularity to, the module that you're propagating is definitely, what companies are leaning towards now
Yep.
with the whole net zero concept. So that's another great approach, I guess. And maybe this is one factor which I think that not many companies pay attention to, which also might be a worthwhile discussion is how much does a building weigh? Not many people take that into account, and I do think that is a valid point because that has a bearing with the foundation of the building and also material costs and what goes into the materials as well. So yeah, I think these are topics which I think Alan, you did mention you had an alternative education portal where you discuss topics that do not probably have much context in
Mhm.
traditional educational setting. So I'm actually very keen to connect with all of the mods and everyone in this room to kind of discuss the potential of sustainability and circularity in business. Yeah, I think that's a great opportunity to kind of get these conversations going. And thank you so much, Brittany, for hosting this room, and Marcus as well. I really did have a lot of good inputs today. Thank you so much.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Roshan, for that feedback. I like that question. How much does a building weigh? Maybe we could plan for that in the future and have you participate in that discussion as well. Michael, Pops, you've come up to the stage. Would you unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and share your thoughts? Mute button is in the bottom right corner. All right. Well, Michael is trying to find his mute button to unmute. We've got Hand up on the stage. Hand, please introduce yourself and share your thoughts.
Hi all. I'm Hand. I have been in the construction industry for 10 years now. I have like some concepts from the talk you said earlier. First, I don't know if we have any zero waste buildings in the world right now. This is the first thing. The other thing that I think the thing that makes the most CO2 emission in a building, it's the heat and the heating and the ventilation system there, and we
Yep.
can, I think, control these things by the material and the wise choice of the system we are applying in the building. The third thing, Alan referred to building context, which plays a huge role in choosing a lot of systems for the building. And the other thing, or the final thought, is that every country has its own standards for the buildings, and in these standards, I think they put the minimum requirements for this building to operate. But to achieve a huge percent of sustainability, we need to put more effort and more standards, and to look for standards higher higher than the ones that were put by a country, and that makes or that requires a huge initial cost, and I don't think any owner in the whole in any country will want to afford this cost. Thanks for listening.
Hi, Hend. Quick thought with what you're saying with the different standards between the different countries and all that, and that is absolutely true. It's not even just a matter of different standards; it's just completely different opinions of what sustainability means and how much people tend to care about it. And like the difference between UK EU to what we have in the US. It's like if you talk about climate change, you still get people rolling their eyes here. Compared to UK EU where everybody is actively working the problem. So I'm just you have to deal with the audience that you're having to deal with in all the different countries. And like for example with the program I put together with GSK, we tried to address that as much as possible. And I just kind of let the UK folks do what they were going to do anyway because it was just part of their general work. Whereas I really had to put together a very thoughtful program to figure out how to actually get it done in the US to get it through people who just didn't want to deal with it if it wasn't basically free. And so yeah, there's definitely challenges with that. And apologies for plugging my website again, but I actually had a lunch and learn get recorded and uploaded to my site from Mace, where they talked about the different standards that are around the world. So going from like LEED to BREEAM to Fit Well, all the other just well in general, and like the other ones, which I apologize for forgetting the other standards that are out there. But yeah, it was really interesting because they were kind of going like one by one through them, looking at how they're the same and how they're different. And it's very interesting. And like some of them, like it gives you goals and like things to work towards, whereas others are just like kind of looking at what you have. And some are better for dealing with renovations of existing spaces. Some are better for dealing with new build. Some basically have to be new build. Um, yeah, so I like there's so many different possibilities out there. There really does need to be some level of standardization, but which you've probably seen this as well. I don't know what industries you work in. Standardization tends to be very difficult because different industries also have different needs and different requirements for what they can deal with. So, like for example, in pharmaceuticals, the HVAC is very difficult to deal with because in all the labs and production spaces, there's a huge HVAC requirement to just maintain clean space. And labs have to be single pass outside air. So you can't recirculate. There's always a much higher cooling value and energy is because of that. And for example, with for any of those clean spaces, there's a bare minimum of any that's actually a classified clean space of 20 air changes per hour through the space, which works out to be huge CFM, and it only goes up from there depending on how clean you want it. So it's like things you have to understand going into those different industries because, and like similarly with semiconductors, they have the same constraints. But yeah, so I mean, like there's different things to understand between the different companies as well as different industries. So I thought that'd be interesting feedback for you.
Excellent. Thanks for that added value, Alan. Michael, did you figure out how to get off mute? There you go.
I sure did. Yes, so good afternoon. Really interesting conversation today. I just wanted to, I guess, add being partial to third world countries. If we're thinking about any donations that, depending on the kind of item and whether it fits, there are many export agencies that are looking for merchandise, looking for equipment, all kinds of equipment. Schools, religious organizations overseas in the Caribbean, and they're not that far away. So just wanted to add that component. And there may be another component that could be helpful if you could potentially look at the country that's going to and see what they're already producing that they may want to export and have some kind of arrangement where there could be some kind of an exchange on that basis as well.
Like a
So
trade in value.
your trade in value, correct. You're right. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that contribution. All right, Roma, I know you entered into the room a little bit late. We're actually getting ready to wrap up. Thank you all so much who've been able to listen on our live stream. Thank you so much, Alan, who has really shared some really great insights about how to do how to have sustainability in mind while thinking about this return to office approach that so many people are thinking about. I think it's been really insightful, and the comments and the feedback have supported that. So thank you as always, Alan. You're such a wealth of information. We appreciate you very much.
Thank you so much for inviting me to do this, Brittany. It's been fun.
Awesome. Well, with that, you guys have a good night or a good morning wherever you are. Rest well and take care, everyone.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye now.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. See you soon.